Get your break. The union mandates your break, man.
Yeah. I get paid for nothing.
Damn right. And let's see, the viewers not roll in, baby. Just gonna give it a little attack. Reposado, what's going on?
Damn, man, you ever get that feeling, just like sitting down and one of your left nut just hurts, and that's on work. It's fucking horrible.
You know what's weird? I have felt that feeling.
And I just stepped outside for a while. I said, like, fuck this, I'm taking a break. And it went away.
Weird.
Why?
I don't know. Weird
It
science.
was a Monday.
Reed
It was a Monday,
Posado's
so
balls ache. Now his balls don't ache. Weird science. Dun, dun. Boo, why did they just stop hurting? What was wrong with his dingling? Weird science.
Yo.
Yeah, that's right. I just turned that into a weird science bit. You know what I always thought would be funny? Right?
What?
If there was just like there's like a homophobic and transphobic dude, but one day he's like, you know what? I think I'm really down with trans men. Why? Well, like think about it. Like they get gender reassignment surgery, so there's just a pile of vaginas out there waiting to be fucked. His friend's like, I don't think it works like that at all.
Yeah, I was guessing like, no, I don't think that works that way, man. Like,
no, the math all checks out.
Or you think capitalism's so depraved that they put like all the vaginas into a dumpster out back and then put a lock on it?
Yeah, they just have like a pile of pussies out back.
And they put a lock on it too because they gotta enforce scarcity.
Oh yeah, you got to do that with your leftover vagina. I just really like the idea of that guy just like suddenly being like, I can get a real vagina for my fleshlight. It's like I would not recommend asking people that. Do not.
This is not under attack.
There he is, Michael Jordan Peterson. Wah, wah, wah. I gotta get the soundboard up. I need a soundboard app.
Gotta drop that bass.
Folks at home, we're getting to the live topic. We're getting to the lesson. We just wanted to do some spoofs and goofs before we started. A couple of japes.
Oh boy, they left us three together. This ought to be good.
Yeah, really. John quits, and then Jenks over in he's in Ukraine right now fighting with the asshole battalion. They're not neo-Nazis.
Is Jake? I thought that was true.
Yeah. No, the Azov battalion is the Nazis. The asshole battalion is just his unit where they're kind of like dicks to the Russians.
Oh,
okay.
Like,
they got like the handlebar mustache.
Yeah, they all have handlebar mustaches.
Leather jackets and some slickbacks.
Yeah, they have all those little newsy caps that fucking dickheads love. They're all riding around on unicycles and demanding for fair trade coffee.
Unicycle F-350s.
Yes.
Diesel. Damn, son. Diesel.
Extra high jacked up.
Yeah.
Rolling coal in a diesel powered unicycle to own the libs, apparently.
Yes. That does all right. I'm not saying do it, but like if you did do it, my first reaction would be to laugh.
It's perplexing how it weighs 1 billion tons, but they still do wheelies.
Depends where you put the motor, right? Like if you put the motor like way up high, yeah, you can probably do a wheelie. You can probably do a flip too.
Yeah, it's like a Mad Max style giant ass ring on a little ass tire. Just the littlest tire.
Yeah, and the operator's just like, why did we design it this way? In retrospect, this was a terrible idea.
No balance to it. Like how does it stay up?
I've never literally been in a fight. We never tested this idea.
Well, that one tire is, cost effective because it's only one tire, right? We gotta cut corners. We gotta make a profit, people.
Fact. Fact.
Higher. What do you mean tire?
That's only how we treat our hospitals.
We got the buggy wheels on that shit.
Yeah, speed buggy, room zoom zoom.
Yeah.
No, I mean the wooden tire that they use in the carriages.
Oh, a Corsa buggy.
All right.
They got an Amish. They got an Amish F-350. It's just giant planks of wood.
That's a
Massive.
fucking contradiction right there.
All right, fellas. All right. It's time to get down to brass tacks. Now, I promised the Q&A on rent. Promised a little bit of questioning on rent. And
Okay.
let's get boring for the next 55 minutes. You got your jokes. You got the fun half. You got that for free. Now suffer if you want the learning. I'm Dan Cohen. And this is the Sons of Tree Air. I forgot I had a button for that for a second, and I was like, shit, the bit.
Oh, I thought.
Can you guys hear those?
Yeah, we can hear the.
Kinda.
What the fuck is that?
It's not. I don't know what's going on, but
That's how I usually go about my day. I just try to act like I don't know what's going on.
I'm sorry. It came pre-programmed with two of the worst sounds ever.
yeah, what is that? I don't even know.
Getting your Ben Shapiro voice ready, right? You're huffing helium right now.
That's
Just
correct.
talk
I'll
really,
be talking
really
like
fast.
Ben Shapiro. I'll be using the logic of Ben Shapiro. Rent is good. Rent is good, actually. Rent is good because it stops people from having too much money and causing inflation. That's what rent does. Landlords are good for the economy because they keep poor people away from money. So actually, you should be thanking landlords, and you should not be being mean to them because it's really, really bad. I'm Ben Shapiro, and I'm a smart boy. I'm a smart, good boy.
Damn, you really jumped the gun on that shit. I didn't even get the.
You forgot the bedtime is fascism, but we're very good, very
That's
good.
the anarchists who say that. The worst of the anarchists are like, bedtime is fascism, actually, because my mommy said I can't stay up eating bonbons and Doritos.
The weirdest take I've seen was the one supported by the State Department. You know the don't bathe, whatever the fuck that was.
What?
Yep.
You didn't see that shit?
Oh, the shower Discord? Yeah,
that one.
Yeah. Okay, I
that's
got
why I
you.
said it was paid by the State Department.
Yeah, that was on the list of good boy hot takes. That's for goddamn sure. As terrible as that one was.
Yeah, those two together, man. I was like, wow.
Yeah, anarchism is when you let your kids just get preyed upon by pedophiles in the wild, and that's good actually because that's freedom. Says the CIA, trying to discredit the anarchists.
Look at the poor anarchists.
Yeah.
And
okay.
They got some good takes, man. They got some good takes.
Yeah, just because our only anarchists quit does not mean that anarchism is bad. It does mean they're quitters, but we all knew that. They're anarchists, not communists. Woo, I just punched. That's how you punch.
Don't punch that.
Wildly started swinging.
You're punching everywhere now. Come on.
Yeah, fuck it. That's all right.
Get everybody in one go.
Left, right, you're kicking yourself in the nuts. I don't even know how you do that.
It's very difficult, but I have very big feet.
It's good. You're covering your bases.
Yep. Everybody gets lovingly ripped. I love you, anarchist. Don't die. I love you. Be good. Just like kick anarchismus out. Just say he's not allowed to hang out in the club anymore. It's fine. You'll be better off. There's nothing anarchismus contributes. Oh, we're going back to anarchismus discourse. Blah.
Nah, don't, hold on, man. Before we go too far, let me remember this quote. I remember I was reading through some John Locke, and he basically was arguing that we have rights because God is our property owner, our landlord, or our capitalist, per se, and we are his property. What do you think about that?
They can't even pretend to get away from feudalism, can they?
No.
Apparently not. Apparently that is not in their wheelhouse.
Yeah, that was John Locke. He's dead now, so don't get too angry about it.
Yeah, I have a lot of problems with John Locke, so maybe it's best I just move on.
He's not on our list of friends.
No.
Well, obviously, I know that. Come on, man. So I was just trying to like deviate the discourse to something not
Oh,
shooting.
right.
You wanted to do deviant discourse?
Oh, later, man.
No, he's talking about he's
The,
I don't know. I don't know.
you translate for me, man.
He is trying to shift the conversation in a direction. I
About
think I
rent.
think I think that's a mistake, but
He wants to
All
shift
no,
the
right.
about rent.
conversation towards
Oh,
rent.
that's what you were doing. You were
Yeah,
doing John
I
Locke
was
because
trying
of
to.
rent.
Yeah, no, I was trying to move it from anarchist discourse to property,
Bro, you could
Oh,
have
and
just brought up. You could
start
have just
shitting
brought up.
on rent.
You could have just brought up musicals. You would have
yeah.
got you.
Let's
What?
attack that thing anarchists hate. All right, I'm back on board. You got me. I'm back in.
Okay, yeah, anarchist and rent. Good
Anarchist
stuff. Good stuff. I didn't even think of that.
owning stuff. What is? Why for? Um. All right, so let's just start. You guys pose the question, and I will do my best to give an answer. Let's go.
Posing questions about rent.
Yep. Pretend you know nothing.
Pretend I know nothing about rent.
Yes.
Okay. Why the fuck is it so high?
Okay. Why the fuck is rent so high? Is the question posed. The very, very short answer to that is succinct for the situation at hand, is that rent can only cause prices to go up until there is a total market crash. So as long as the market has not completely shit the bed, rent will go up. It has to. How is that?
That's pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah, good enough.
That's good
Well,
enough.
it seems like like a shooting yourself in the foot type of thing. Is
Why are there homeless? If we're just going 101.
Why are there homeless people? The market functions in such a manner that it has to have scarcity to retain price value. So, in order for your house to be a piece of capital, other people can't possibly afford to buy that house or buy a house.
or buy a box
Or buy a box, yes. That's also why you have to kick down the boxes, because once you find out you can live pretty much anywhere under any
or a
condition.
tent.
Yeah, got to get rid of that. That's going poorly for the capitalists.
Okay, so this one's an intelligent one. This isn't like a 101. I was just wondering this one. I'm just thinking this one over myself. So apparently there was like before, was it like in feudalism there was like a vagrant class, and then they converted it into homeless people.
Oh
Like
yeah, that was
how did that work?
That's a very excellent question. So, the previous class dynamic is they did have something akin to a wandering worker, right? Somebody who did roam around the country in what we would, in the modern sense, term as homeless, but they were more like the enfranchised unhomed, right? That's the purpose. That's the life they lived. They chose not to
Yeah, they were
settle.
like travelers, like on yeah.
Yeah, and they served a function where essentially they
vagabond.
would. Yes, I mean the term is vagabond. That's where the vagabond term comes from.
That's what I was looking for. The term. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and they served as they served as a mobile labor force functionally. That was the exchange, right? So if you needed a little extra help,
But so you're telling me they want both a migrant labor force and they want to force people into homes at the same time?
you,
Those mother.
well, okay, as far as that goes, right? What you need is a certain amount of people who are uh,
Desperate.
unhomed, for the market purpose, right? So the vagabond class becomes the homeless class because the wandering laborer now isn't worth as much as in the market framework. The tying all compensation to currency in lieu of life sustaining features, right? So in the old model, you could pay a vagabond in food and a place to sleep, and the vagabond would be satisfied for the night. He doesn't need a permanent piece of property to survive in society. You give him some gold, he could, buy some food perhaps, buy some wares he needs to continue his travels. He can live off of the land as well, because the land is not in the traditional sense under capitalism, owned. The land is just everybody's, right? There's the territory of the king, sure, but there's also just this large, essentially swath of land under the king's ownership that makes up the kingdom that is not actually formally, owned.
Was that
It's the
the
commons.
commons?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. The plot
So,
thickens.
what happened with the mentally ill? Because I'm guessing under feudalism, they were treated differently.
I will caution you, I'm not a sociologist, so I'm not the best person to ask on this. But to my understanding, depending on the nature of the illness in question, right, they would either be committed to a sanitarium and frankly abused. If they had the right kind of mental illness, at least during their lifetime, you would find them probably in the church or doing simple tasks. It depends how recognizably sick you are,
Because this is like a thing. I don't know. Well, I know like in the States. Sorry, I'm going off a little bit.
No, go.
But in the States, they tend to hide the homeless. See, and those homeless that are mentally ill.
Let me help you out with that one. That one's warehousing. These people can't see anything as anything other than a warehouse. So when they come up in their old age, and even older and beyond, they basically just warehouse themselves into oblivion. It's literally like the only way they can think of how things work. They think in terms of like logistics and warehousing.
Liberals.
So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was confusing the mentally ill for the liberals in this case.
No. It's the people making the rules. It's the liberals.
All right. So the liberals think in terms
of warehousing. Yes. So basically, if you have a problem of a bunch of people, then you just want to stick them in a place and then stick them somewhere out of your way.
Interesting.
That's why they run into the same issues as conservatives on the border camps, which they should fucking close. Because they think in terms of
everyone out.
Because they think in terms of warehousing. It's just
put them somewhere.
Containment and moving it somewhere else. Yeah, that's why they're so afraid. That's also why they're so afraid of the conservatives, because they don't have any limits.
Yeah,
right.
If I'm going to piggyback off of that, right, the idea is that the homeless are a surplus population. We don't need wandering vagrants, right? That's the premise to it all. We don't need them. They're a surplus. We don't need these human beings. What do you do with them then? Well,
yeah, the hierarchy.
Yeah,
you can't outright kill them because that's what the conservatives want.
They want to find a place for them in their world, right, wherever they want to put them.
And that place is in some sort of a warehouse. They would never call it a warehouse, right? You wouldn't do that.
Yeah, they just call it a camp, and they just don't put concentration in front of it.
Right. Yeah, that's...
Yeah. Because I was going to trail off, because in Mexico, you can see the vagrants and the vagabonds. You can still see them. And some of them are mentally ill. And generally, I don't know if this is... Maybe I'm generalizing here. They tend to be treated a little bit better.
That makes sense. I mean, it just makes sense.
Yeah, not here. Not here. There, yes.
Yeah, here's like a lot of contempt, but like over there, there's more nuance to it. Like, we know they're going through something real difficult.
Yeah. Well, don't you guys have like a tie-in to some sort of indigenous culture?
Well, it's more varied than that, because we have a bunch of indigenous cultures.
Right.
Just, the Aztecs. It's like
right. So you guys would have a framework for a concept of giving a damn about the homeless, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Oh well. Yeah.
Yeah. They don't. There's none of that here.
Although that shit's fading away too, because that's
Oh yeah, they're exporting shitty. They export shitty shit all over the world.
Yeah.
U.S. global leader in making things shitty.
All right, so back to the Q&A. Sorry, that was.
No, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, it's
Answer some
perfectly fine. Chime in.
interesting questions. Yeah.
Remember, we have been doing this show for 5 years from a purely American perspective. We just simply don't have the perspectives from even our neighbors, right? We don't have a Canadian on the show or anything. We haven't had a Canadian guest. We have nobody weighing in on it from an alternative. So yeah, you're good, man. Have at it.
I'm generalizing a little bit because there's more nuance to it. Everything's
Oh
a
yeah.
little
I
bit
mean,
shittier and so forth.
Well,
But
sure.
you can only speak your truth, sir.
anyways, so rent's fucking high because they need to maintain people out of homes, so the rent can stay high.
Kind of. All right. So if we're gonna dive backwards, like this is kind of funny because when Jenk's here, you know what I mean. Like you expect there to be a more intellectual air, right? Because he's our we utilize him mostly as a stand-in for liberals, right? We try to give them a little bit of a
Just prod him along and get him to come to the conclusion himself.
yeah, we try to give them a little bit of
Oh, that is shitty.
he serves because behind the scenes. I'm gonna let you in on a secret here. The leanings are there, friends. The understanding is there. We got more. There's a reason he chose the moniker Angles, right? There's not,
Jank, sir.
yes, you know, um,
Combination Jack Angles.
He's not just a liberal.
not just a liberal anymore. Boop boop beep boop 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 beep. But right. What we need to start with is this notion of what is the natural world. I'm sorry we have to go but rent is kind of a weird beast on its own. Of its own accord, rent isn't really all that intuitive. Okay? So, if we have the natural world, there are certain things. If we were to strip away all of the human constructions, there are certain things that are just there, right? Like the dirt, land, trees, certain natural foods, and so on. Like these things are all just there. Nature just hands that to us for us to utilize.
Air.
Yeah, air, water, these kind of things,
Fire.
right? So in the conditions prior to capitalism, the land was just there. And you have resident cultures and you have nomadic cultures, right? Not truly like city building, but pre-city building. They live in smaller groups and they tend to stay around a far smaller area, and the land provides. Their economic production is more akin to, it's very we use the term primitive here not to be derogatory, but it is not the complex scheme of capitalism where we have to try to make profit out of everything and so on, right? So against
what is the natural world?
What's that?
So what is the natural world? Pardon.
What is the
whatever's
natural
out
world?
there?
Yeah. All the resources that are already there or were already there. All the natural resources of the earth. That's just the natural world. There's nothing. Frankly, there's nothing all that exciting about it. It's just the land, the dirt, the water, the air. All those basic things. Even the raw energy that comes from the sun, or the fossil fuels that are beneath the earth, coal, all that stuff that's already there, that by itself exists and doesn't need human refinement, right? Now, you may have to go find it, you may have to dig it out of the ground or whatever, but the point is, this is not the same thing as a chair. A chair is something that after you've taken raw materials and pumped in a bunch of labor and energy, you get something out of it. You get a chair. So this is the raw materials, if you will. The raw materials of existence. All the animals that are there you use to kill, and you can kill and eat. All the actual plants that are edible. All those things are just the natural world. That's the way to conceive of this for this discussion. So, from that backdrop, you have nomadic cultures that roam and they exist in a means by which the land provides. And they add human labor to the land to kind of increase the yield, if you will, but they don't do the city building behavior. They don't do all these kinds of behaviors, right? They only engage in that nomadic kind of hunter gatherer society, and that's how they that's how they acquire things. Likewise, you have the more residential tribes, the tribes that stay in that operate in a smaller land area, right? But even then, still their existence functions more or less the same, minus the overwhelming movement, right?
Right. They're the ones that start agriculture, right?
Yes, they're the ones who would primarily start the agriculture, right? That's their advancement in terms of human society. They start agriculture. With agriculture comes city building, right? Town and city building. Things can get bigger because you can coordinate.
So it's their fault, right?
Well, this notion of some kind of ownership, right? The notion of our land and their land starts at that point. What your territory is, what your territory isn't. And that's kind of critical for this whole situation, because we need to be able to conceive and fathom of us and them, ours and mine, right? And we need to be able to conceive of it not in a notion of like perhaps two nomadic tribes that run into each other and are fighting over the same mammoth, right? We need to conceive of it as physical territory instead of it being a series of active agents competing over a kill. It needs to be this generational idea that these are our people, and that we are distinct from other human beings, given this feature about our existence. And that's a pretty big piece of technology, because that piece of technology over time gives the ideological groundwork for like Roman property ownership, right? The notion of a border, the notion of a line, the arbitrary idea of the nation state. It's not developed under the Roman Empire, but the seeds of it are developed. This next idea of the nation state proper, which comes after feudalism, right? In the in-between, we have the kingdom. So now, instead of all this land being the Roman Empire, the Roman republics, and it's, these people all have to pay taxes to Rome, the king goes a step farther, right? The king says, this is all mine. You owe me this money. Everything in this area is mine. Under Rome, there's still some sort of notion of individual ownership. Now, this is always dangerous, because then people say like, oh, look, Romans were capitalists, blah, 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 which dramatically misunderstands their means and modes of production, right? But idiots will do it. But they can conceive of yours and mine in a certain sense, and they can conceive of exchange in a certain sense, and they can conceive of certain modes of production, slave labor, the artisan taking his time and crafting, etc. They don't scale up to the factory at this point. They don't have mass means of production.
Sorry then.
No.
So I'm raising my hand in real life, so Did they have like the notion of a private citizen? The Romans.
They have a notion of the citizen as somebody who is landed, who controls a piece of land as a subsidiary of the Roman Empire, who has the right to raise an army, who has the right to vote.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
They had the right to raise an army?
Yeah, they had armies, yeah.
Yeah.
Private
the armies weren't like anything unified. It was like you need an army, you just went and got some troops.
Yeah. You just got a bunch of bastards together and you went fighting. But they have the right to do that under the banner of Rome, under the context of the Roman Empire. If you were securing territory.
Oh, and we're bringing that shit back, right?
Well, the libertarians want to. The libertarians really want that, but in the name of themselves, right? They want to go a step farther. The kings, they want to go to the king. If you look at the feudalism, what's the jump to feudalism? Instead of service to the empire and service to your fellow Roman, which includes acquiring human property to serve as slave work, which includes finding resources to distribute to other Romans for the purpose of primitive accumulation. These particular individuals, they served that kind of role, that kind of in between the Roman government and the external, right? So we start seeing these divisions. But again, I can't stress it enough. The relationship to the artisan, to the product that he makes, the relationship to the blacksmith is, the artisan, right? What they make, how they distribute that at the small market, the intermediary trader who comes along the way and kind of haphazardly redistributes gold. We see, when this gets back to it again, capitalists see all that and they go, see, capitalism, but they're not the same property relations, they're not the same notions, they're not the same, the dominant means mode of production, they're not the dominant politic, and so on. Like, these things are just, they're there. Traders are more of a necessary evil than they are the foundation for politics, right? The foundation for our politics is, we have to appease the traders. The traders. Traitors.
Capital.
Yeah.
Traitors.
Yeah, there's a reason those two words.
So I dropped off the CIA, cut my call off because I was going to say that we brought the private army back.
Right. Well, they're trying.
Yeah, that's all.
They're trying.
I mean, like everything they do, they make it a corporation.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's their formation. They have to go beyond the king. How do you go beyond the king?
Rent the army.
Yeah, the right to an army.
No, rent the army. Rent a army, like a rent a. Rent a what the fuck is called?
Rent to own army. Yeah.
Yeah, like
like rent a center.
Yeah, like rent a center. Like rent an army. Like
center, get a couple armies.
Yeah.
Yeah, get a couple of dudes. Go
fight.
Right,
guys, I need you to. I need to go lay siege.
Need to go lay pipe is more like it. Am I right?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I'm right. Yeah, I am. But yeah.
Sorry,
they're like, yeah, wait, we're socialists. We can't do that.
Oh, we can lay pipe. If the communist man does not know how to lay pipe, is he truly a communist man? Something to think about. Yeah.
I got a side thing I gotta bring up.
Shoot.
Go.
It was this dude on I don't remember who it was, on Twitter or whatever.
Oh boy. I already love where this is going.
It was one of those conservative dudes. He was like, there is no way possible for women to have sex with you.
What?
he thought he's owed a woman.
He was so deep in his nonsense.
That's some incel shit right there.
That's depressing, sweetie. No, they just don't want to fuck you because you say shit like that.
He was just telling on himself. The common problem here is you.
Yeah, sweetie. No.
That's just like a negative feedback loop. They're so into it. They don't know how to quit. It's almost like an addiction.
Yeah.
Right. Like
they're watching themselves. They're watching their friends piss their pants on their Discord, and they're like, "I can't quit you. I can't."
Anyway, sorry to interrupt. Back to Rent.
No. Don't ever apologize. That was that's fun, frankly.
I always thought.
So back to Rent.
Like that.
Rent a bride, right? So did they have like this rent a bride sort of thing?
Nah, you don't want to get a used bride.
Or was like more like a buy a bride?
Yeah, they buy. Then maybe they can sell them in a brothel or something. I don't know.
Yeah, their conception of marriage and things like that was different than our conception of marriage. It's more about, primarily it's about power consolidation, land consolidation. Again, primitive notions, right?
Lineage.
Compared to our good modern understanding, at least.
Lots of inbreeding.
Yeah. Modern, quote unquote, because we still have that shit, right? Like the power consolidation sort of thing. Like there's
not
still,
as much
like marriages and shit.
I mean, of course it still exists, but not as much.
Right.
And that only really starts once you get into like political dynasties or, dynasties of like entertainers or whatever they do.
Yeah, you still see that notion of what we call a dynasty is still there. It still exists in a sense that we can recognize easily. It's just it's not the dominant form, right? That's the thing.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
Dominance, just do you, boo. Who cares?
Yeah. So if we move to feudalism, right, we have the king, and the king doles out micro portions of his own territory for productive purposes to other nobles in exchange for loyalty. This notion of this abstract notion of loyalty, right, where you're supposed to perform certain actions for the king. You're supposed to raise armies for the king. You're supposed to pay taxes to the king. You are supposed to control that territory in the king's absence. This is, again, this is still as if Rome existed to some degree. The notion of Rome is still there. It's just a matter of how we go about and conceive of it. In this case, it's all based on the king and ultimately God. Before in the Romans, it's about the rule of the gods. It's, from the theological standpoint, it's the relationships are different but similar, right? These ideas come from somewhere. That's an important thing to remember. So, when we have the move towards mercantilism, that next in-between stage, right? We have the idea that there are independent property owners within the framework of the kingdom. They exist for their own ends, separate from the king, but still in the king's dominion, still to some degree at the behest of the king. That's also important because that is the groundwork basis for individual property, private property, right? The idea specifically that individual owners can own the means of production. Now, the holdover between that is the literal landlord. I mean, that title hasn't changed. The landlord, the lord of the land, originally is an aristocrat. They're an aristocrat who produces, right? They produce physical things off of their land. They coerce people into performing labor in some fashion. Serfdom, indentured servitude, right? Proper slavery, stolen labor, all these modes to turn their land into a productive economic entity, which becomes the basis for like Thomas Jefferson's yeoman farmer, right? The small farmer, the serf on the land, liberated from the monarchy. That's the basis for that. So, the landlord becomes a holdover, right? The landlord originally wants rent in product. They want product that they can then sell on the market. Modern landlords look at that framework and giggle because that's kind of a stupid thing to do, right? If you're paid in tithe corn or rent corn or what have you, what can happen to corn if it's sitting around? It goes bad. You're pissing money away. You're literally just letting it rot. You're letting money rot. That's dumb. So we have more of a push to use currency, right? And over time, the push to use currency into a non-expiratory form has only increased. First we went from gold, which could be melted down, into paper, which is not really worth to melt or burn, right? You're just throwing value away. Not many people are going to do that. And then we've moved to the electronic currency, right? We're trying to. God knows the libertarians.
Zeros and ones, bro.
Zeros and ones.
Zeros and ones. Oh, man. The crypto crash.
This is heavy.
Yeah,
this is heavy.
Should we mention the crypto crash? Nah.
Who cares? Who cares? Do it.
That's inevitable, and there will be a crypto recovery as well, as long as rich people want it.
Yeah.
That gets into that gets away from rent, more so into like the demand for money, how the demand for money actually functions in reality.
But we can go back into rent because this is another thing. Usury.
Interest.
Yes.
Yeah, that's just financial interest.
Pay for find it.
Usury, right? Which is like the original notion, which is just demanding money for money's sake.
Interest, money on top of money, compounding debt.
Yeah,
but heavy ass interest.
In some instances, sure. In some, we have that now. That's really not. Again, that's one of those things we learn somewhere and have perfected over time. But we have we're certainly not original in that. You know what I mean? You remember when I went on my big rant about originality being dead? There's a reason. There's a real ass reason. I feel like originality is dead. I feel like we've hit a wall as long as we're under capitalism, because capitalism just seeks to keep mulching the old and doing it over and over again. It doesn't seek a new. It needs to perfect the old, because then the labor is saved. The actual mental labor behind it is saved. Yeah, how's that? How you like that one?
Yeah, there's nothing new under the sun. Yeah.
The good old reboot.
Yeah, the reboot. We see it all the time. You know, we're
Then they're all confused. Well, it worked this time. Why didn't it work this time?
Yeah.
I put in money. It should come out with a lot more money.
That's what every other feedback loop tells me. If I put in my money a little tiny bit and I steal it from other people, I get more. Why didn't this work? This is bullshit.
It's got the right directors. I don't know what people want from me. Originality? No.
That can't be it.
So the push for currency.
Heart? No.
Yeah.
So the push for currency was because commodities effectively in that time went to waste.
Well, once you no longer have nobility as a dominant form, right? Once nobility is fading as a dominant form, God can't value you, right? You can be valued by God as long as you're an aristocrat. The higher up you are in the hierarchy, the more valued you are by God. And it doesn't matter which hierarchy you follow up, the warrior hierarchy of the military class, the theological hierarchy of the priest class, or the actual governing hierarchy of the aristocratic classes, right? The higher up you are, the more God values you. That's obvious. So those vagabonds who could live that way are on the low end of the totem pole. So the idea of classism is already well and good. It's already well established. Nothing there is a surprise. Seen it, right? We've seen that one before. So as we move, as we move upwards in time, and we come to the era of capitalism itself, we arrive at a situation where we move towards factory production, right? We dramatically change our means of production, and we change our means of distribution, right? We continue to try to make these things more rapid and more quick. We change our manufacturing techniques such that the individual pieces are mass manufactured instead of one person doing everything. By doing that, we increase the volume of things that can be produced because we've lowered the technical skill of the actual labor, right?
Right.
In doing so, we have what we conceive of as the wage earner and the market. And we have the capitalist, the bourgeoisie, the not the landowner necessarily, the property owner, right? The person who owns the factory, the person who has a right to utilize the factory. That's kind of important. Because the capitalist doesn't necessarily own these things, but they have the accumulated labor and property to rent these things. They can utilize land, because that's the one thing they don't have access to readily, unfortunately for them, is physical land. That's not necessarily readily available. That land is owned by somebody. It's owned by the landlord class. But what goes on that land, the walls and so on, may be under the purview of a capitalist, right? The building, the machines inside the building, the labor that is injected into those machines to produce, all those things may be owned by a capitalist. That's what we understand as property ownership, the ability to buy portions of the means of production in order to increase your wealth and thus buy more of the means of production. That's private property. You exchange that for a portion of your profits in the form of a wage to take labor from others to increase that disparity. But then we have a problem, right? We can't explain the landowner in this manner. We can't do that for a couple reasons. The landowner is simply claiming private ownership of a piece of land. The landowner didn't create it. The landlord didn't put his labor into it. And the landlord only profits for himself after purchase, right? After any maintenance fees, based upon the productive labor of the capitalist's workers. If the worker generates profit, the landlord is, if you will, a leech on top of that capitalist, right? There's somebody on the capitalist's back sucking away value. So the value is already sucked out of the workers. It's already bled dry out of the workers. And then on top of that, you have the landlord coming and saying, to continue to be able to perform this business, you have to give me so much money. So the landlord is a functional dead end to value, because the landlord can't do anything but consume with that. And just like with a capitalist, if they have a sufficient amount of profit, they cannot consume beyond that. The money just sits there stagnantly. So too does it with the landlord. And it's important, it's very important to conceive of it in that manner, right? That they actually suck away surplus value as well. They suck away stolen surplus value from the capitalists. So they steal, they rob the rich to give to themselves. And it's very, very important to understand that relationship. The landlord is the enemy of the worker, because when it comes to private housing, they suck away what little they have from a wage. And that'll only ever increase. If wages don't increase to match, the landlord will always outpace it. But if wages increase to match, the landlord
increases anyways.
The rent will increase anyways. The rent will always go up until it is an unprofitable venture, until nobody can pay for that land.
I want to say one thing. It's not all landlords. Not all landlords are leeches. Some other forms of blood-sucking parasites.
Let me be very clear. As somebody who has one rental property and rents it at a fixed rate and has for 10 years. Okay, one piece of rental property. When it is occupied with a renter, it is rented at a fixed rate. I haven't changed because my costs, even as they've gone up, it really is irrelevant. The costs never go up high enough that I would feel a compulsive need to do it, right? In that activity, I am leeching somebody else's surplus value.
Yeah, no, I'm just making a joke though.
I know.
Like, come on, man.
I'm absolutely.
As long as you don't refer to your renters as rentoids.
They are not rentoids. That is a person who rents that.
Then we're all cool.
Yeah, there are a certain amount of costs that society has placed upon me in that role, for the purpose of making sure that not all of the money collected from that remains stagnant, which is not the ideal solution, because the ideal solution is, right, that just my renter just owns that. But thanks to the wage relationship that renter is involved in, they can't make that purchase. It's just overpriced. Thanks to other landlords, this gets really into the technical part, but thanks to other landlords wanting to keep their value up, the value of my property is artificially inflated such that I can only flip it to other landlords, which I refuse to do. I know what my neighbor charges his renters. I don't want to see people charge that. That does not make me good. That does not justify my course of action in the grand socialist sense. What happens when socialism comes? I don't own that anymore. And that's okay. I've gone this far knowing that. I'm fine with it. You can get over it too.
To an extent, it's actually like it's a burden on the person that has the property anyways. You know, because they have to maintain it.
Well,
right.
So let's
they have to like maintain they can go bankrupt as well. And that's like their prerogative not to to become a worker or whatever.
They inevitably will go bankrupt for some reason. One way or the other, they will go bankrupt. There is no scenario over a long enough time frame without any intervention, if the market is left to play out entirely to the market's own devices, they too will go bankrupt and they will be absorbed, and that property will be absorbed by a different landlord.
Yeah, but I mean the mentality in itself of the landlord that's like not as red as you would be that I need to keep up the that extraction because I don't wanna become homeless or whatever they think it's gonna happen to them.
Right. They have to. So they have to. They can take strategies within the framework of the market. Some of them will invariably take strategies that allow them to continue that relationship. That's true. Some of them will. But even then, inevitability, I like to call it the heat death of capitalism, that scenario. Inevitability catches everybody. Because number one, eventually you die. That's number one. You can never maintain the relationship you want to maintain to that property because eventually you will die. You will no longer extract the value from it. You're dead. Right? That's the cold, hard truth. You're just going to die. Now, during the tenure of your life, at some point, you're going to get too old to be able to maintain that property. And you're going to increase your costs by having to have people come in and maintain it for you. At some point, it becomes more unprofitable between your own health and the expenses of the property and the expenses of the labor required to maintain that property in your stead, that it will rot and become valueless, and it will become more valuable to sell it to another landlord. Moving beyond that, at some point, right, if wages are not pegged to inflation and you are always trying to stay above the rate of inflation, let's presume for the sake of argument that inflation and wages rise at the exact same percentage, and that is the reflecting of cost. Right? So 1 point, we'll say for the sake of argument, it's always 2%, right? Yearly. Every year then, you have to beat inflation or you haven't made any money because you don't make things. You don't make things. You don't make a profit, right? You profit because other people profited and you sucked away the value. So when they increase everything by 2%, right, and get physically more money, but on the margins, they only made a 2% profit. You can't profit if you're charging what you were when they were making 2% less profit. So you have to raise yours. But if you raise your rent, and this is, by the way, this is all before other market forces kick in to fuck this plan up. You have to raise your rent to raise your profit. If you raise it by 2%, absolutely nothing has gained, right? Because the 2% that was given to the worker has been absorbed by you. If you're renting houses, the 2% profit to the business has been absorbed by you. When the landlord takes the 2% on the inflationary rate, like if a capitalist has gains of 2% in a year, and we're talking the most benevolent capitalist ever, such that he shares that 2% with his workers entirely. Okay, the capitalist does not get the 2%. The capitalist's earnings have gone stagnant. Relative to now the costs of goods, which have gone up 2%, because he was able to profit 2%, he's lost money. On top of that, the landlord, if they're charging rent at the rate below the 2% gain, at the old rate, money is lost. So the landlord then has to raise their rents by 2% to maintain profitability. Eventually, things will decay on them because their costs have now gone up unilaterally 2%, even matching at inflation. Eventually, that extraction is a negative drain. Over time, if I keep adding 2% to each part of the chain, 2% to wages, 2% to the price of goods, 2% to rent, eventually I start losing. And the landlord always has to come out on top because they own the physical earth that we all stand on, that we all sit on, that we all fucking exist on. It may take a long ass amount of time, but the state of society is such that the landlord is actively worse than the capitalist. Because that is the pressure, right? When you're looking for what is the pressure to make capitalists behave the way they do, that is the pressure on them. Somebody owns them too. The capitalists have a way to get out of that, right? They can buy the land. If the capitalists can buy the land off of a failing landlord and utilize that land for their purposes, now the landlord doesn't exist, right? They can also, in addition to being a capitalist, they can also become a landlord. A worker can also function as a landlord. They can do this too. But once they undertake that journey, they exacerbate the problem. They don't make it any better. Because again, if we're going by 2%, now the worker is gaining 2% on rents from his boss, and he's getting a 2% wage increase. So the capitalist is failing by 4%. What does the capitalist have to do as a result? To make more money, the capitalist needs to cut costs. That's jobs. That's workers. That consumption is lost in the economy because those jobs are gone. That consumption is lost in the economy because those prices increase, so people consume less as a result. They physically can't. The hard numbers say they can't consume more than they are. Now, the worker landlord or the capitalist landlord, right? They go back, they're still extracting a hefty profit. They're fine, but they act as a place to lock money up and trap it rather than as a place for money to be redistributed throughout the economy so that it can function as a means of exchanging values, which is its ultimate purpose. That's why money exists in the form we utilize it in. It is just to transfer values from one person to the other. It acts as a middleman. Because when, for example, I buy your chair, right? You take your money and you go buy food from the greengrocer. The greengrocer comes to me to buy a window for their house, right? Very simplistic exchange, but in all three cases, we've used the same pot of money to transfer three different goods amongst the three of us. It acts as a medium of exchange. It acts as a way to store that value for us to conduct that business. That way everybody gets what they need. That's how distribution is supposed to work. I needed this, you needed this, I needed this. The way to do that is somebody buys from somebody else, and we funnel that money through each other. And we do that in kind of an impersonal meta sense almost, right? Because if we're cognizant of that, there's no need for us to do any of that. We'd have to strike some sort of barter bargain where you trade me this, I trade him that, he trades you that. That's a lot more difficult to get everybody to agree, especially if the three of us don't actually like each other. Money serves to smooth out those social relationships because even if you don't like me, if I have a need of a chair from you, you're going to sell me the chair in normal circumstances. Again, it doesn't always work like this. We can think of examples where it doesn't, but that's the pitch, right? That's the pitch to money. It smooths out those social relationships and indifferences such that everybody can still exchange values and everybody can go home, if not happy, then at least fulfilled in that particular need. But what does the renter do, right? The renter holds your ability to live inside. And we don't think much of that, right? Because of course we could have vagabonds. We could have homeless that can still exist in communal sheltering. We could have those things. But we don't. Because the landlords suck the commons out, right? Getting back to that comment. There's no commons for them to live on. You literally, unless you own the land, you can't exist off the land. And if the land is not suitable for existence, a half an acre is not suitable for existence. You can't create enough things that you need on that land to fulfill that mode of existence. Can't do it. It's not feasible. It's not possible. There's no up and down building big enough to do that. So landlords come in and take that fallback, that natural state, if you will, right? Worst case scenario, now you live as a vagabond, but you have a means to exist within society and survive in society. Landlords come along in this new version and suck that right on out. Under feudalism, the landlord would essentially try to find those vagabonds and put them up for the night in exchange for some labor. There was a social relationship where the vagabond could continue to thrive. Don't have that anymore. The landlord sucks away all that surplus value throughout society. Their job is destroying that. That's what, when people say, landlord's not a real job, it is a real job. They are the black hole of capitalism. They are where these things go to be condensed and die and be wasted. That is their function. They are not even a trash can. A trash can serves a very valuable function. It helps you keep your house clean. They are a black hole. They just destroy.
So, hold on.
Yeah. Soak that in.
Get into this. No, that's fine. Like, where does the boom bust cycle go into all this shit? So I remember.
Well, consider what I said about the landlords, right? Consider about
because they're all accumulating whatever capital they can, in the sense sucking it off the workers. And right. You said that they're gonna eventually it just condenses in the hands of the landlords, right? And since they're the black holes of capitalism.
Yes, it will always, always, always condense into the hands of the landlord. Over time, that will happen. When
too much of it's condensed into the hands of the landlords, that's your bust.
Yes, there you go. That's exactly right. When too much gets vacuumed up in their hands, at that point we have a situation where there's not enough liquidity in the economy. When there's not enough liquidity in the economy, gentlemen, we're busted.
They
Roll
must
out the money
constantly
printer.
expand. They must
Roll out the
constantly
money.
expand.
Go, go,
So they gotta
go.
always look for new avenues for money.
But they are required to constantly expand. If they're not constantly expanding, that means they're contracting, they're stagnating, they're dying off. They have to. There is uh, there is no alternative for them. This is the natural path. Again, if we say nominally a 2.7 or 2% interest rate unilaterally for inflation, inflation every year causes everybody, every cost to go up. The cost of labor goes up 2%, the cost of goods goes up 2%, the cost of rent goes up 2%. In the case of labor and prices, that means you have a stable and stagnant economy. Every year the price goes up 2%, the workers' wages go up 2%, the price, it hammers out. It just does. It just reconciles. Whatever quality of life they have an exact, rigid quality of life. Now, the quality of life can never improve because you have a perfectly stagnant economy. The class structure is held together perfectly at that point. There's no interruptions. There's no problems. The class structure simply exists as is. And it will continue like that ad infinitum. The numbers actually don't matter. There's no way to go up and above it. Just can't happen, won't happen, doesn't matter. But if we introduce the landlord to that equation, the landlord sucks away rent on both ends. So every time inflation goes up 2%, the landlord gets 2% richer, everybody else gets 2% poorer. And in any immediate exchange, in any immediate aftermath, nobody will notice. Right? If you only look at the shift between A and B, you'll never really see it. It's too small. But just as over time, leaving an object sit, some of those atoms will want to break apart and it makes it brittle. Here too, over time, society will just collapse around it. It will decay and rot. That's the problem with the idea of rent. If you want to understand the numbers on that, right? Imagine right now that thanks to a chain of inheritances, right? I have $10 million. So I spend $1 million of that on 10 separate $100,000 properties, right? I leave the properties completely blank. I advertise that I have these properties. Each one is worth $100,000. I find 10 capitalists to want to rent that land. Those capitalists demand certain facilities, right? So that they can do their capitalism. They're all 10 different sectors of the economy.
Mm-hmm.
So I add, out of my $10 million, I add another $1 million to each property, 1.1 million, right? Because I give them their facilities. Now the capitalist now at that point the capitalist has to shift because now the capitalist has to fill those buildings. I gave you the buildings to fill. Now you are going to have to fill those buildings with what you need. That's labor. That's your specific, unique tools to your work. If it's factories, offices, it doesn't matter.
Right, and that kind of explains why they're all panicking for the get back to work in the office type of thing, right?
Right, because now all that capital is worthless. Because if we can do the job without the capitalist location, the capitalist is now paying rent on a thing that they don't need. They can shrink their operation by getting rid of those physical properties, but who does that actually hurt?
The poor landlord, because he can't, charge rent anymore.
Right. The capitalist doesn't have to pay you rent to make you work from home. The capitalist gets to dictate what you do inside your own home. You hand them capital in that exchange, in the form of your residence. Shit.
Also the
Now,
worker.
yeah. They get the fuck over the worker. Don't get anybody wrong. Your middle manager loathes work from home. But the person who owns him, and you, he loves it. You just handed him access to a ton of free capital he don't have to pay fucking rent on. In fact, he gets to make the claim that he's doing you such a big favor, he doesn't have to pay you so much for a fucking raise because you don't have to pay for gas anymore, do you? You ain't got to pay the gas to go to work, so I don't have to factor that in when I'm thinking about whether or not I raise your wages to keep you on board.
That's true, man. I wouldn't have to pay for my shitty tacos at the 7-Eleven and stare vacantly in my car while I eat those shitty tacos.
Yeah.
And curse the day I started working.
Yeah. You don't have to do any of that. None of that shit.
Yeah, I can do that shit in my room.
Right. You can go do that shit in your room. Why the hell am I paying for it? Before, I had to make a nominal gesture in that direction because you're right. You do have to pay for those things or you won't bother coming here. I'm over a barrel. I have to account for that. I don't have to do that anymore. And shit, it's not like you're eating out at lunch all the time. You should be cooking. You're at home. Cook yourself something quick. Buy something cheap and cook it quick. I don't have to pay for those things. I don't have to pay for a fucking break room. I don't have to pay rent to somebody who owns a vending machine and treats it as if it's a piece of real estate and I make no profit from it. I don't have to get greedy and buy my own vending machine and stock it so that you pay me money while you're at work. I don't have to do any of those things anymore. Owners love work from home. Hell, they don't even have to pay people to make you stay at work now. They don't have to pay for security to make sure only authorized people are there and only authorized people stay there and only authorized people do the job.
They love it if they didn't have to convince you to because if they didn't have themselves rent.
Right. They can downgrade their office size and save a bunch of money. They can save a bunch of money on rent. They don't have to rent nearly as big a facility.
They get the ultimate out on it.
Right. Capitalists love work from home. Oh, and workers are so happy. Workers are so happy to give it up. That's everybody's dream. I can work from my house. I can give my house or my apartment. Think about that. What if you rent already? What if you rent? Now, the relationship of you and your landlord is intruded upon by a capitalist, a random capitalist who walked in and said, you may be getting the rent, but I own the shit inside of here now. I pay for that shit. You don't. You're sucking money away. The rent is being paid to the landlord, and the capitalist is getting a free kickback the landlord didn't agree to. Because he can't charge the capitalist rent for your work from home equipment, especially if you shut your fucking mouth. If you shut your mouth about working from home, that landlord is none the wiser. Why do you think they're stalking you inside your house? Right? Consider OnlyFans, where you take an artisanal pornographic production, right? You become your own boss when you do your OnlyFans. You turn your house that you're paying rent on as a residence into a capitalist venture. Why does your landlord sneak in randomly then? They want to find out if you're doing that because they want to raise the rents on you. And by gummit, they have. When they find out about that shit, they raise.
I think the other there's like another benefit.
That's why they all cover the windows if they're hiding the credit.
No, but there's another benefit for the capitalist, no? Because he can hide what the notion of a means of production is.
Yes. The capitalist.
He can like obfuscate it a little bit more, make it seem less exploitative.
They're gonna bring up the word capitalism, so yeah, that's way deep down. That's way buried.
No, but you're right. You're right. They do get to obfuscate again the relationship of you to capital. They get to obfuscate it further. And remember,
There's levels to this shit, man.
there's a lot of levels to this shit. And again, when it comes to work from home, the person who loves work from home the most is the person who ultimately profits. They need you working from home. They love it. Are you kidding me? They make out like fucking bandits. The push to go back to the office is ultimately the push of the middle manager who loses control and loses meaning, because you don't need a middle manager. You don't need as many middle managers to oversee it. After all, what the fuck are they going to do? They're not going to get in fistfights anymore. They're not going to get into, if one of them gets into an unproductive state, they can't drag the whole production down with them. They can't fuck on company time anymore. They can't fight on company time anymore.
Oh man, you guys were fucking on company time?
Oh, you never knew? Oh, these places have so much sex in them.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised, bro. I don't every since I've ever seen.
But all that unproductive time. Yeah, well, all that unproductive time is gone. That shit ain't
Just don't get caught. Just don't get caught.
Get caught. All that unproductivity is gone. This all hurts the landlord. So who do you think is pushing primarily to get their ass back into the office? It's the goddamn landlord.
You think the capitalist like comes and well, I didn't want to say go, but goes after and like sucks the cum out because that's like value extraction? Sorry.
I like the way you think, sir.
You like the way you think.
No, you do not. Sorry.
Oh, yes, we do. We do like
my fucking brain's rotted.
Your brain
Damn.
is rotted. You belong here.
Found it quite hilarious.
Yes. You've got the perfect kind of brain rot, sir. Don't worry. In good company. What?
Sorry.
Don't apologize. The one thing I'll say, don't apologize. Derail us, we'll get back on track. Don't worry. I know you're new. You're the new guy in the office.
What you apologizing for? You're doing good work.
Yeah.
I was gonna. Alright, so where were we?
So where were we? We were at the idea that the landlord is a profit-sucking vulture. You knew it. You knew it in your heart. You understood it a little bit. You didn't understand in full. Let's fix that. That's where we were at. So
let's go.
Yeah. So these fucking vultures, right? They're vacuuming up profit. That destroys value. Again, eventually over time things decay. Eventually, at that 2% rate, the capitalists who are there can no longer afford it. So you play the same game. You lower your rent a little bit, you advertise it to another capitalist. That other capitalist is going through that exact same problem with their former landlord. So the capitalists shuffle everything around. They go through a big fucking song and dance, yada, 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 right? Everybody moves around, everybody shuffles. The same process happens again. Only now, in that course of that, rents have gone up higher than they were last time. Same fucking shuffle. Same fucking problem. And they absolutely do lower a little bit to lure you in. Until landlords become cognizant of other landlords and what they're charging. And then at that point, they go into one of two modes. They will either enter into an unspoken or spoken, let's face it, it could be spoken, but they will enter into a rent control agreement amongst their class, what we consider criminally speaking a cartel, but in practicality, it is a matter of common interest. When they are non-competitive, they will just go ahead and enter into a profit agreement wherein they do not hurt each other's profits. By the same token, if they are competitive, let's fucking go. That fight's about to be bloody because they will raise or lower their rent at their whimsy for the purpose of fucking over the other person. And the goal will be to acquire that property. So when you see prices in the real estate market go wonky, some of them are wonky because somebody's selling off excess property and they're trying to extract money from a landlord. Some of them go wonky because they are trying to tank everything very, very low and lower all property values to, on the front end and the back end, hurt their rival landlords and flip out their property. Landlords will look to crush every business possible such that an area, right? If we take an area, let's say, I don't know, a neighborhood in a major city, the landlords that are there will raise and raise and raise the rent until the place falls into disrepair, at which point they will burn off those assets to another landlord. That landlord will resculpt that neighborhood in their own image, offering attractive rents to pull people in. And that will cause the residents who are there, who have been wounded, to be booted out, moving in a whole new population. Until at some point, that becomes unattractive, and the whole cycle repeats. So we have a relationship of two separate types of landlords. Landlords whose purpose is to destroy and suck up that surplus value, and landlords whose purpose is to shift populations and suck up that incoming value. And they, over the course of their careers or their lives or their transitions, will take on both roles. And you know I'm right. You know what process I just described, don't you?
Yep.
Yeah. Anybody want to say it for the class? Nobody? It's gentrification.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, damn, what's wrong?
Yeah, it's just what you call gentrification is nothing but the natural and totally, under capitalism, a totally reasonable cycle. I extracted so much out of this neighborhood that it's now in disrepair and I'm no longer interested. To combat that, I'm going to sell it off to a new landlord who will invest in it and fix it, because that way I don't have the cost of fixing it, right? I may sell it for lower than what I think it's worth and what I should be extracting rent for it, but I will pass it off to somebody for an extremely low cost and push those costs of repairs off onto them. That new landlord is going to look at everything there, including the human beings, as old and worthless, and try to push them out of that particular neighborhood. So they begin a process of what we call renovation. That is, they begin investing all the money they're essentially going to invest into the property up front, making it quote unquote nice and new. And then they go into an advertising cycle. Look at the renovations in this neighborhood. It's now an attractive place for X, Y, and Z. And it's not at all surprising or suspect that X, Y, and Z are white, and the people who were there generally aren't, or they're regarded as a very low form of whites, such that it doesn't matter what you do to them. It's just gentrification.
Super evil.
Yeah. All that is just, when people talk about gentrification, while that has added components to it, it is just the natural cycle of landlordism. It's just the cycle of land ownership in an urban area. That's
they wouldn't dare accuse landlords.
I will. I just did.
Well, not you. I mean,
you know what's fucking going on. That's the point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we say it here.
Go ahead too.
It's not like when the difference between the three of us is I sat down and bothered to waste my time working it out. You guys are healthy.
Yeah, you stare into the void and see the Lovecraftian monster that is capitalism all day. Oh man, we just tune it out.
True, welcome back.
Yeah, I'm channeling True right now.
You are.
He says he's still in Ukraine. What? What the fuck? Damn, I thought you went back. Something about Tennessee.
Y'all, I just had to tell you about this beautiful manatee I found, and I know the federal government says I'm not allowed to be near the manatees anymore. God damn, the whiskers on that.
He's still on my psychic line. No, I can't understand him. He has a southern drawl. I can't parse that through. Sorry, guys.
It's okay. It's okay. I had
Anyways,
to piggyback off your connection.
he says surplus, more like slurp plus.
Heyo. That's a good one, True.
But yeah, let's touch on this too. Gentrification, understood one way, is a purely racist action that is a unique feature and phenomena of racist American capital. That's one way to understand it, right? That's the liberal notion, right? And the solution is always more black capitalists, right? More Latino capitalists, more Asian capitalists, whatever, right? Rainbow capitalism.
It's okay. It's okay when they do the gentrification.
Right. They'll do the gentrification for us and launder it, right? They'll launder the racism for us. The other way to understand gentrification is simply the natural process by which landlords buy and sell property, and the fact that it has a race component is
coincidental.
It's not coincidental.
It's the other word.
It is the function by which landlords are permitted to engage in that very behavior. Racism is not the end goal. Racism is the machinery that runs cover for landlords, because the discussion.
Not an end.
Yeah, it acts as more of a shield, because they get way more benefit out of this being the result of a few bad racist actors, right? Capitalism gets more out of that meta-narrative than, look, this is the natural cycle and we've decided the permanent underclass are black folk. So the racism is and it's really only an inherited racism. We could have done this to any of you. And God help you if you're another race and move into those neighborhoods, because we will. And I don't say that, right? I don't tell the masses, I don't say that on this show with the goal of saying like racism isn't a problem.
No, of course not. It's more nuanced.
Right. What I am saying is that if you remove the racism, the exact same quantified misery would be inflicted haphazardly instead of on purpose.
No, they find another way to segregate people, because in the end, that's always it's an effective shield.
Sure.
That's why, like 2 years ago, I barely found this shit out. BlackRock, the real estate thing, bought Ancestry.com, right?
Yeah.
So we know they're doing evil shit with that.
Absolutely.
But it could have been any other trade.
Land. And all the land.
And all the land.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, the first thing they're doing is they're simply making sure to not tell my mother we're Jewish, so she keeps getting weird about race. They just keep bouncing around Mediterranean cultures, but that's a whole different thing. I won't get into that today. But yeah, the machinery of gentrification, they could do that to an all-white neighborhood. They have.
They do.
They do. Anywhere that they believe there's an intersection of values, they're going to do that to. On whatever is in the way. And I say whatever because they don't see human beings and see human beings with lives, goals, aspirations, foibles, quirks, charming features. They don't see them as these complex living organisms. They're a pot of value. They're a wallet with legs. And if that wallet with legs ain't got much money in it, fuck them. Because we need to be able to extract a lot of surplus. Now, again, in our society, based on our history, yes, there is certainly a racial component. Yes, that is certainly intentional. The thought behind it, again, I can't stress enough, the thought behind it isn't hatred. The thought behind it is that you need a population to push this onto. You need poverty. You need poor people to have a surplus population that anything can be inflicted upon. And as it turns out, English whites didn't bite. They threatened to cut people's heads off, so they turned to the next closest thing. When they couldn't turn, when England finally found a population to bite, if you will, one that their military prowess could subjugate and wasn't at risk of killing them due to distance, that's the population they subjugated. That wasn't their first choice. That's an illogical first choice. Why would you travel 5,000 miles away and play scavenger hunt to find people? There were plenty of people in English towns. There were plenty of surplus human beings in English towns. They just couldn't get them to bite on generational slavery. So then they had to turn to making those people the troops who would enforce generational slavery. But they're only a step above. They're useless too. They only serve one function. Now that legacy continues on with us today. And the landlords are certainly eager to help perpetrate it because that's how the landlords have always profited off of other people's labor without paying them anything. Let me be absolutely explicit. The landlord is the apex slave driver because he turns everything in front of him into a slave. In fact, arguably worse than a slave, right? Because the exchange was always you do labor, and in exchange I'll give you the raw materials of life. At the most basic cruelties of slavery, there was still an exchange. In this, it is a one-way exchange. I will withhold the basic necessities of life unless you labor and give me the proceeds therefrom. So you're working for two, bitch. And that has always been a feature of capitalism. The landlord is a feudal holdover that needs to be abolished. Again, as I've said it, if socialism hits America tomorrow, it looks like I lose a house. Oops, oh well. Have at it, guys. Somebody needs it.
Big deal anyways.
Yeah. And the reason I say that ultimately is not only because I want to save my own ass in this whole exchange, but at some point you need class traders. And in this case, I have the dual class relationship of worker. Actually, three. I have three economic relationships depending on what I'm doing, right? When I'm doing this, artisan. When I'm at work, worker. When I'm just sitting around doing nothing, once a month, landlord. Or whenever my tenant says some shit's broke, I gotta go call the plumber. Get that shit done right. But the point is ultimately you need class traders. And I'll tell you right now, if I'm willing to do it, they can suck it up. I'll be fine with one house. I'll be fine with one residence. So will they. They'll learn to get by real quick if they want to keep their heads. Because under socialism, of course, the landlord is a surplus population that you can do anything to.
Man, you can't see the grin on my face.
I corner in that slaughterhouse.
Hey, as I've always said, you have to give him a chance to turn treason.
Yeah.
If you want any kind of ethical imperative in that whole kind of bloody affair, you have to give them a chance to turn treason against their class allies. You have to give them the opportunity to surrender. After that, though, you want to fight to the death over it, that's your fault, man. All right, you asked for this. Don't come crying to me later. I don't know why you mad. You wanted to fight. Now that you losing. That's pretty much it. So, yeah. We can touch on rent more again. One of these days I'll actually break down the math. When Jake's around, I usually have to sit and do the math and do a whole bunch of bullshit, so this was nice.
Yeah, you don't have to spout numbers, man. Like that's what most debate lords do, right? Like when they get them cornered, they start spouting off numbers.
Yeah, they just make up statistics on the spot and throw them out there. I mean, I have to sit down and actually do the math and walk it through, and it becomes a whole fucking thing that's ultimately pointless because it would be better to see it in writing anyway, you know. Having somebody have to crunch the numbers on hand and demonstrate it, and I don't even get into what happens with fucking value over these things and how that's even worse. But you know what? I'm already here. Let's do it real quick. Ready?
All right.
All right. I know this is such a dry boy episode. John would be proud. May he rest in peace in Chinese heaven. Okay. So, what happens with that land, right? If we leave the land untouched as is, it's bought for $100,000. Each year that land, right? Even if you have $10,000 in nominal costs each year, right? So the first year is 110,000. The next year is 120,000 divided by 2. The actual value of the land decreases because nothing's changed on the land, right? Outside of routine maintenance, nothing's changed on the land. We've added $10,000 more to it, so it's now $120,000 cost for that land. But we've also added another year, another temporal frame of reference. So the divisor becomes 120,000 divided by 2. Next year is 130,000 divided by 3. 140,000 divided by 4.
Goes down.
Right. Each year it's going to go down. The actual value of the land you're on, if you're pumping in a set amount of costs, it's going down. Now, costs fluctuate, right? Some years you don't have to pay anything. Some years you pay very little. Some years you have to pay a hell of a lot. But just assuming an average cost increase, right? If you assume an average cost increase, then over time, that land on that curve. Now, I understand that somebody's going to argue, well, you're talking purely theoretically. Yeah, that's the problem. We're talking purely theoretically. That shit you libertarians do to show how great capitalism is in theory, well, I got bad fucking news. It's not. It's not great in theory. The fucking theory says it's going to fucking tank everything because your land is worthless. Or, to put it another way, if you got 9 years out of it, or you got 10 years out of it, and your total costs were $200,000, you effectively paid $20,000 a year on an initial $110,000 purchase. You paid less per year than you ought to have, because you're not going to put in $100,000 worth of labor every fucking year, such that the cost per year is $100,000. You made it go down. So even if you turn around and sell it for $100,000 fucking dollars, you essentially got your goddamn money back. Because at the time you have it, 10 years, at $200,000 invested into the property, if you flip it for $100,000, you got your goddamn money back. Remember, that year it only cost you $20,000. After the first year, you already had it. Likewise, if you look at all your costs as sunk costs, you're not getting that money back, and you're only worried about the cost per year, right? An individual year. If you flip a $100,000 piece of property and you paid $20,000 on it this year, you've made $80,000. You've soaked up 80,000 surplus units of value away from somebody else. Again, that's if you include sunk costs, right? The way I do it is rolling cost. The way I'm calculated is rolling cost. At rolling cost, you make out like a fucking bandit because it's still only 20,000 goddamn dollars. Now let's presume over the course of that 10 years, that property you bought for $100,000, and that property you pay $10,000 a year for on average. After 10 years, other people's properties have also arbitrarily gone up because of their investments, such that you can sell it for higher than what you originally bought it for. That means even as compared to your costs, you're making out in a better deal than if property values were perfectly stagnant. You're making way more goddamn money. On top of that, right, if we add that after those $10,000 in improvements went to a capitalist, so that they could do rent, right? They could do work on the property by paying you rent. At that point, you've got, if you're making $10,000 a year, right? You're making $10,000 a year. Your costs are negated by your input. So the value of that land over 10 years is $10,000. It's depreciated. Your cost over the years, you paid $100,000 for it. You can now flip it because you did physically put something on the property that could be used by another capitalist. You have the stones that you can charge a lot more because you can charge them for the cost of the building, and you can charge them for the land. So you paid $100,000, you're going to flip a profit right there. Now add on to it that instead what you do is you raise your percentage of your rent, such that it exceeds the cost of your improvements. and you decide to hold on to it for another 10 years before you sell it. So you hold it for 20 years. So over 20 years, your costs on average go down each year dramatically. $100,000 over 20 years is $5,000 a year. And the rolling costs are absorbed by the profit that you're making as a landlord. Although profit may not be the right word, perhaps we should just stick with the word rent, but your rent is exceeding your costs such that you have, at the end of the day, more money. And then you go ahead and flip it after 20 years because now your ass is old and you're going to die. One final hurrah. But remember, you've got shit on that property you can add arbitrarily to the price. You've got the initial price. You don't want to lose any money, obviously. You make a fuck ton of money. You soak up so much fucking surplus value in any one real estate transaction. You just, right out of the economy. That shit's destroyed. And then you have the stones to go ahead and fucking die and pass it on to your fucking worthless kid who didn't do anything to have all that money. So now that person sucks away from the economy in terms of surplus value without contributing.
Started. Right.
So
Yeah.
I remember this shit. One of these. This is a story about like smoking pot in my house. I was over there in Mexico. Like, we were high as fuck. It was me and a friend.
Yeah.
And like we were like, you know what happens when you're high as fuck and you think you're like an intellectual, right? You like start browsing Wikipedia.
Sure.
All that shit. So we landed on the Medici guy.
Which
like
one?
one of the bankers, the Italian banker.
Rodrigo?
Yeah, the one who started the fucking. What's the bank called?
Which bank?
You know, Medici.
Was it Bank of Florence?
Yeah,
like
the
that?
Bank of Florence or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then this guy, like, my friend, he was fucking high as shit. He said, like, I don't know, that's fucking crazy, you know? Like, he just started putting money there and just watched it fucking grow, and that's all he ever fucking did with his life.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So what was the fucking point?
That's all capitalism required, my friend. That's all capitalism ever required.
It's inequality in a nutshell.
Yeah. Pretty fucking trippy.
Pretty trippy because it was a question about meaning. What my friend had.
Yeah.
Like he just watched the number grow. That's all he did with his fucking life.
Yeah.
Kind of fucking sad.
That's all he ever had to do. Right? That's all he was required to do as a fucking capitalist. All he ever had to do.
Sorry, somber note.
Right.
Nah, it's just fucking wild.
How do we transpose the concept of rent to whatever is going on with software development?
Well,
digital landlording.
I'll tell you what. Let's just save it for
That's
next
what
time.
IP rights are.
Let's just save it for next time. Ha ha! Suckers, we don't even have to think this week. We'll just go right into that. Ha! We got your asses. We'll do that one next time. And we've managed to push off the crisis of what in the shit are we supposed to do next week.
My rent is too damn high.
My rent is too damn high. Hold on. I'm going to do it really cool. Ready? I'm going to take us out on this. All right, so boys, say your good nights.
Night, boys.
Bye.
The rent is too damn high. What? The rent is too damn high.